On a rainy autumn afternoon in Seattle, with the comforting sound of raindrops tapping against the windows, Emily Thompson sat at her laptop in her home office. She had been successfully building her career as a freelance marketing consultant. From the next room, she could hear the voice of her 5-year-old daughter Sophia playing with her dolls. 3 years ago, Emily's life changed dramatically. Her first husband James had died of cancer. When she found herself alone with 2-year-old Sophia, Emily felt completely lost. However, with her innate strength, she pulled herself together, transitioned to work-from-home jobs, and made time with her daughter a priority. Light entered her life again 2 years ago through a fateful encounter with David Richards at a neighborhood coffee shop. It all began when Sophia dropped her cupcake on the floor and started crying, and David kindly approached them. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'll buy you a new one." David introduced himself as a construction site supervisor working for a local construction company. With his gentle smile and warm gaze, he naturally connected with Sophia too. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her relationship with David progressed smoothly. Every weekend, he made time for Sophia, taking her to the park and cooking together with her. When Emily was busy with work, he would support her by saying, "Don't push yourself too hard. I'll take care of Sophia." However, David had mysterious aspects too. When she asked about his past, he would get a distant look in his eyes and simply say, "I've had some difficult experiences, so now I want to live positively." About his family, he would evade the topic by saying, "I'm not in contact with them anymore." Emily didn't probe deeper. She understood that everyone has a past they don't want to discuss. A year ago, they got married. The ceremony was held in a small church with only Emily's parents and a few friends attending. No one came from David's side. Emily felt sympathy for his explanation that, "I'm estranged from my family." After the marriage, the three of them seemed to be living happily in their new home. However, a few months after the marriage, subtle changes began to appear in David. Using work stress as an excuse, he became more short-tempered than before. He began treating Sophia particularly harshly, saying he needed to discipline her properly. "Emily, you can't spoil children. Especially girls need to learn discipline now for their future." Emily felt somewhat confused by David's words, but she thought that men's approach to child rearing was different from women's. Since James had been unable to participate much in child rearing due to his illness, she didn't know what paternal strictness from a man looked like. Emily's work was also going well, with increasing requests from major corporations. This led to more business trip opportunities. David was supportive, saying, "Focus on your work. Leave Sophia to me. Your career is important. I'll take good care of Sophia, so you can concentrate on work with peace of mind." Encouraged by David's words, Emily began putting even more effort into her work. Since Sophia would say, "I'll be fine with Daddy," Emily could go on business trips with peace of mind. One evening at dinner, Sophia said in a small voice, "Mommy, Daddy sometimes makes scary faces." Emily laughed and replied, "Daddy is tired from work. But he loves you." About 6 months after the marriage, Emily began to notice changes in Sophia. Previously, Sophia would jump into Emily's bed first thing in the morning and cheerfully greet her with, "Good morning, Mommy." But recently, she was often found curled up small in the corner of her room when she woke up. "What's wrong, Sophia? Are you feeling sick?" When Emily asked, her daughter would shake her head and answer in a whisper-like voice, "I'm fine." However, her expression had lost its former brightness. What was particularly concerning was that when David entered the room, Sophia's body would clearly tense up. The daughter who used to run up to him saying, "Daddy, welcome home," now only watched him from a distance, as if gauging his mood. One morning, while Emily was preparing breakfast, Sophia came into the kitchen and hesitantly spoke up. "Mommy, Daddy is scary." Emily stopped what she was doing and looked at her daughter. "Scary? Why?" Yesterday, when I forgot to put away my dolls, Daddy got really angry. His eyes were so scary. Emily pulled her daughter close. Daddy is strict, but that's an expression of love. He wants Sophia to be a good girl. However, deep in her heart, a small anxiety was sprouting. David's discipline did seem too harsh sometimes. But Emily wasn't confident in her own judgment. She wondered if she had been too permissive as a single mother, and if she didn't understand what paternal strictness from a man was like. That night, Emily consulted with David. Sophia seems to be afraid of you. Could you be a little gentler with her? David looked up from his newspaper and smiled coldly. That smile was terrifyingly cruel, unlike anything Emily had ever seen from him. Emily, you must not spoil children. Especially girls will learn to depend on men if you do. If we don't teach them proper discipline now, they won't become decent adults in the future. But she's only 5. Maybe a little. Because she's 5, it's important. I have more experience with child education than you do. Emily couldn't argue against David's firm attitude. He was indeed older than her and had more life experience. She thought perhaps she was being overprotective. Over the following weeks, Sophia's changes became even more pronounced. She would sometimes tremble during meals and increasingly wake up from nightmares in the middle of the night. When Emily asked, "What kind of dream did you have?" she would only say, "I don't remember." One afternoon, Emily had an important client phone conference scheduled. Sophia had developed a fever and came home early from kindergarten. "David, I'm sorry, but could you take care of Sophia? Today's meeting is really important." David smiled gently. "Of course. You focus on work. Leave Sophia to me." However, after Emily headed to her office, Sophia cried and pleaded, "I want to stay with Mommy." David's expression changed completely. "Your mother is busy with work. Don't be selfish." 3 hours later, when Emily returned home, Sophia was lying unusually quietly in bed. Her fever had gone down, but her daughter's eyes were vacant. "How was it?" When Emily asked, David replied, "She slept well. Nothing to worry about." However, Sophia looked at her mother with an expression as if she wanted to say something. That weekend, Emily was scheduled for a 3-day business trip for negotiations with a major West Coast company. If she could land this contract, her career would make a significant leap forward. However, seeing Sophia's condition, she felt anxious about leaving home. "Maybe I should cancel the business trip," Emily murmured, but David shook his head. "If you do that, it will damage your career. I'm taking good care of Sophia, so go with peace of mind." But lately Sophia's condition. Because you worry too much, Sophia becomes anxious too. If the mother is confident, the child will feel secure. Emily had to be convinced by David's logical persuasion. Perhaps he was right. Maybe her anxiety was being transmitted to Sophia too. The night before the business trip, Emily visited Sophia's room. Her daughter was curled up small in bed. "Mommy, do you really have to go?" "I'm sorry, Sophia. But I'll be back soon. Daddy will be with you, so it'll be okay." Sophia said nothing, but gripped Emily's clothes with her small hands. Emily didn't notice that those hands were trembling. The next morning, Emily headed to the airport. She called home several times from the car, but David only said, "Everything's going smoothly. Don't worry." She couldn't hear Sophia's voice. "Could I talk to Sophia? She's napping right now. It would be a shame to wake her up." The same kind of exchange continued on the second day. Emily tried to concentrate on the business negotiations, but somewhere in her heart, she was concerned about Sophia. What particularly bothered her was that there was a subtle change in David's voice. The previous warmth had faded, and there was somehow a mechanical quality to it. On the night of the third day, Emily finished signing the final contract and breathed a sigh of relief. It had been a great success. However, thoughts of her family won out over joy. She hurriedly packed her luggage and took an earlier flight home than planned. On the airplane, Emily was struck by an ominous premonition. Sophia's trembling hands, her vacant eyes, and the fact that she hadn't heard her daughter's voice even once in 3 days. Everything began to connect in her mind. "It's okay, I'm probably just overthinking," she told herself, but Emily's heart was beating violently. When the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, Emily's heart was dominated by heavy anxiety. Throughout the flight, she had repeatedly looked at her watch and thought only of getting home. The 3-day business trip had ended in great success, but that joy was overshadowed by worry about her daughter. In the taxi, Emily repeatedly checked her cell phone. David's last communication had been silent for 12 hours since their last phone call. "They're probably both sleeping," she told herself, but it seemed unnatural for 3 p.m. When she got out of the taxi in front of her house, Emily noticed the strange silence of the house. Normally, light would be leaking from the windows and she would hear Sophia's laughter, but the house was as quiet as a graveyard. All the curtains were closed, as if no one lived there. When she opened the front door, heavy silence enveloped the entire house. "I'm home." Emily's cheerful voice echoed emptily, but there was no response. She left her suitcase at the entrance and headed to the living room. What she saw there was David lying on the sofa, staring at the TV with an expressionless face. News program sounds were coming from the TV, but David's eyes were vacant, as if he wasn't really watching the screen. His clothing was more disheveled than usual, as if he had been wearing the same clothes for 3 days. "Welcome back." David said this mechanically without even turning his face. That voice had none of its previous warmth and had a coldness as if she were talking to a stranger. There was no question of, "How was the business trip?" or words like, "I missed you." Emily felt something cold in the depths of her chest. "Where's Sophia?" To Emily's question, David answered without taking his eyes off the TV. "She's sleeping in her room." "At this time?" "Is she feeling okay?" "She's probably tired." David's curt response deepened Emily's anxiety. Her steps naturally quickened as she headed to her daughter's room. Walking down the hallway, the abnormal silence in the house bothered her more and more. She couldn't hear any of the usual sounds of daily life. Sophia's room door was half open. Emily quietly opened the door and peered inside. In the dim room, she could see Sophia lying in her small bed. "Sophia? It's Mommy, I'm back." The moment she quietly approached and looked at her daughter's face, Emily's blood ran cold. Sophia's face was pale, and her lips had turned purple. Her breathing was shallow, as if she was barely alive. Even more shocking were the countless bruises remaining on her daughter's face and arms. There was a hand-shaped bruise on her cheek, and red lines like finger marks remained on her neck. Blue bruises were dotted on her arms as if she had been grabbed. "Sophia! Sophia!" Emily gently shook her daughter, but the response was sluggish. Sophia's eyes slowly opened, but they were unfocused, and it took time for her to recognize her mother. "Mommy?" Sophia whispered in a thin voice. That voice was completely different from her energetic daughter's voice 3 days ago. "It's okay, Mommy's here." "What happened?" Instead of answering, Sophia began to tremble slightly. Emily instinctively knew that trembling came from fear. Her daughter's body temperature was abnormally low, and she seemed to be suffering from dehydration. Emily picked up her daughter and rushed back to the living room. David was still sitting on the sofa, continuing to watch TV. "David! Something terrible has happened to Sophia. What is this about?" David slowly turned around. His expression showed no surprise or concern, but rather an annoyed look. "What are you making such a fuss about?" "Look!" Sophia's face, arms, What are these bruises? David stood up and smiled coldly. That smile was terrifyingly cruel, unlike anything Emily had ever seen. She was a bad girl, so I just disciplined her a little. Don't be so dramatic. Discipline? You call this discipline? My daughter is nearly dying. It's because that child wouldn't listen. She kept crying, I want to see mommy, I want to call mommy. It was so noisy I couldn't stand it. David's tone was as emotionless as if he were talking about a broken toy. Emily took out her cell phone with trembling hands. Stop. David's voice suddenly became low. If you call the police, you'll be in trouble too. As a mother who left her child to go on a business trip. However, Emily wasn't listening. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911. I need an ambulance, please. My daughter can barely breathe. The address is. While Emily was giving the address, David clicked his tongue and sat back down on the sofa. He acted as if he had been dragged into something troublesome. 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens approached. Emily waited at the entrance holding Sophia. Her daughter's breathing became even shallower, and her consciousness was becoming hazy. The emergency crew arrived, and the man who came in first wore a name tag that read, Mark Davis. He began checking Sophia's condition. How long has she been in this state? I just got home. I was on a business trip for 3 days. Mark frowned when he saw the bruises on Sophia's neck and arms. These were clearly signs of abuse. However, the moment he saw David, his expression changed dramatically. His face went pale and his whole body began to tremble. Mark's eyes showed an expression as if seeing something unbelievable, and he muttered quietly, No way. This man is. Mark approached Emily's ear and whispered in a trembling voice. Your husband is a dangerous person. I'll call the police immediately. What? What do you mean? Mark took out his radio and gave instructions to his colleagues. Contact the police and Child Protective Services. There's suspicion of child abuse. And. He looked at David once before continuing. Check the suspect's name. It might be Michael Harrison. David's face changed color when he heard that name. All his previous composure collapsed at once, and he tried to stand up. Wait, what are you saying? I'm David Richards. Don't lie. Mark's voice trembled with anger. I'll never forget you. I know what you did to my sister. While the ambulance siren broke through the night silence, Sophia was taken to the emergency room at Seattle Children's Hospital. Emily held her daughter's hand tightly, watching the emergency crew work desperately on treatment. Mark continued contacting the police through radio even in the vehicle. The suspect's identity is Michael Harrison, 39 years old. Multiple previous charges for child abuse cases. He should currently be on probation. Emily couldn't believe her ears. On probation? Then why was he free to act? And why hadn't she been informed of this? Upon arriving at the hospital, Sophia was immediately taken to the intensive care unit. The attending physician, Dr. Jennifer Coles, was a pediatric emergency doctor with 30 years of experience. She grasped Sophia's condition at a glance. She has severe dehydration and hypothermia. Additionally, there are signs of mild asphyxiation from neck compression, Dr. Coles explained calmly. These external injuries are clearly intentional and show typical symptoms of systematic abuse. In the examination room, the doctor gave Emily a detailed explanation. Your daughter has bruises in more than 10 places on her body, and from their shape, we can determine they were made by adult hands. The injuries around her neck are particularly dangerous, and if you had been a few hours later, her life would have been at risk. Emily listened while crying. While she was concentrating on work, her beloved daughter had suffered such pain. By law, such cases must always be reported to the police and Child Protective Services, Dr. Coles continued. We've already made contact. An hour later, Seattle Police Detective Dennis Lee and his partner Detective Michael Turner arrived at the hospital. Detective Lee had 15 years of experience as a detective specializing in child abuse. "You're Emily Thompson, right? First, let me tell you that your daughter's condition has stabilized," Detective Lee began speaking in a gentle tone. "However, there's something important we need to discuss. Please tell us in detail about your husband." "My husband is David Richards. We met 2 years ago and married a year ago." "So you know him by the name Richards," Detective Turner interrupted. "Actually, that man's real name is Michael Harrison. He's a repeat offender who has committed 3 child abuse cases in the past 5 years." Emily's world collapsed. "That can't be, then why?" "He used a completely false name and even created fake identification documents. It was meticulously planned to deceive you," Detective Lee explained. "According to our database, Harrison abused 2 stepchildren of his former wife in 2019 and received a 3-year suspended sentence. Later, in 2021, he seriously injured his cohabiting partner's child and received another suspended sentence." "Why suspended sentence? Why isn't he in prison?" Emily's voice trembled. "Unfortunately, due to legal loopholes and light sentences due to insufficient evidence," Detective Turner showed a bitter expression. "But this time is different. We have medical evidence and witnesses." At that moment, Mark Davis appeared in the hospital corridor. He had come to request police questioning. "I also have something I want to testify about," Mark said with a determined expression. "That man hurt my sister." In a separate room, Mark began telling his experience. 4 years ago, my sister Lisa was 7 years old. After our mother died in a traffic accident, Michael Harrison, who was our mother's boyfriend, temporarily took care of her." Mark's voice trembled with anger and sadness. "At first, he was a kind man. But violence began after a few weeks." "Specifically, what kind?" Detective Lee asked. "When Lisa wouldn't listen, he strangled her neck. He wouldn't give her food and would lock her in the closet all day. When I came home from work, Lisa was crying every day." Mark continued. "One day, I found Lisa collapsed and unconscious. She was taken by ambulance and stayed in intensive care for 3 days. Lisa's condition at that time was exactly the same as little Sophia's today. Why didn't he receive a heavy sentence at that time?" Emily demanded. "Harrison was cunning. He claimed the child fell down the stairs and she got hurt by accident, and Lisa was too frightened to tell the truth." Mark clenched his fists. "He also got lawyers involved, and in the end, he got off with probation." The next day, police formally arrested Michael Harrison, aka David Richards. At the time of arrest, he was packing at home and showed signs of attempting to flee. In the interrogation room, Harrison showed a defiant attitude from beginning to end. "That child was bad. I just disciplined her because she wouldn't listen." "Discipline? Is strangling a 5-year-old child discipline?" Detective Lee calmly questioned. "Women get spoiled if you pamper them. They must be strictly disciplined from a young age. You've repeatedly committed similar acts in the past, haven't you?" "That's a misunderstanding. I was thinking of the children." "Then why were you using a false name? Why didn't you tell the truth to Mrs. Emily Thompson?" Harrison showed agitation for the first time. "If I had, she wouldn't have married me." This confession revealed his planned fraudulent behavior. Meanwhile, detailed examinations were being conducted at the hospital. Sophia's body had more serious injuries than imagined. Cracked ribs, bruises to internal organs, and concerns about developmental impact from psychological trauma. "Fortunately, there's no danger to her life," Dr. Coles explained to Emily. "However, complete recovery will take time. Psychological care will be particularly important." 3 days later, there was contact from the district attorney's office. Michael Harrison was charged with aggravated child abuse, fraud, and probation violation, and this time he couldn't escape a prison sentence. Combining past cases with this current case, we expect at least 15 years in prison, explained prosecutor Sarah Wilson. Furthermore, with fraud charges for using false names, the possibility of parole becomes extremely low. Emily felt relief along with deep self-blame. Thoughts of, if only I had noticed, and, if only I had been more careful, wouldn't leave her head. However, Mark told her, "You are a victim. He was a professional at deceiving people. You shouldn't blame yourself." The trial was held 3 months later. Mark, Lisa, and other victims courageously took the witness stand. Harrison showed no sign of remorse to the end, continuing to claim, "I wasn't wrong." The verdict was 20 years in prison, without parole. The judge sternly declared, "You have inflicted irreparable wounds on children. It is necessary for you to be isolated from society." When Harrison was led away from the courtroom, Emily shed tears of relief for the first time. Sophia was safe. And other children would also be protected from him. 6 months later, Emily and Sophia had moved to a small apartment in a quiet residential neighborhood. They sold their previous house and decided to make a fresh start in a new environment. In the kitchen where morning light streamed in, Emily was making breakfast together with Sophia. "Mommy, put lots of blueberries in the pancakes today." "Of course. Let's put lots in." Sophia's voice had regained its former brightness. She received psychological counseling twice a week, and with support from a child psychiatrist, her daughter was steadily recovering. She still had nightmares occasionally, but she no longer showed the fearful expressions of before. Emily was also receiving therapy for herself. "You are a victim. You don't need to blame yourself," her counselor repeatedly said, but it would take time to completely dispel her feelings of self-blame. Still, every time she saw her daughter smile, she felt positive. During these 6 months, the friendship between Emily and Mark Davis's family had also deepened. Mark's sister Lisa was now 11 years old, and having had similar experiences, she was connected to Sophia by a special bond. "Playing with Lisa is fun," Sophia said. She said she had scary experiences too, but now she's become strong. Having picnics in the park with Mark's family on weekends had become routine. Mark's wife Carol was a gentle woman who became emotional support for Emily. "Family isn't just about blood relations," Carol often said. "The feelings of caring for each other and supporting each other are what create true family bonds." Meanwhile, Michael Harrison in prison was facing a completely different reality. The other prisoners' gazes toward child abusers were cold, and he constantly felt in physical danger. Even after being moved to solitary confinement, the weight of his past actions tormented him. No one came to visit, and he spent lonely days. "Why did I do such things then?" he would sometimes mutter alone, but it was too late to feel remorse. The long 20-year sentence told the story of the depth of the wounds the victims had received. One day, Emily received a request from a child abuse prevention organization for volunteer work. "Could you talk to other mothers about your experience?" was the content. Emily hesitated at first, but Sophia's words, "If mommy protects other children, I'll support you," pushed her forward. Once a month, Emily began speaking about her experiences at the local community center. She continued conveying, "No matter how perfect someone seems, don't overlook changes in children, the importance of trusting your intuition, and the importance of seeking help instead of keeping everything to yourself." A year later in spring, Sophia entered a new elementary school. Her homeroom teacher understood the situation and was considerate to ensure Sophia could have a secure school life. On the day of the entrance ceremony, Sophia shouldered her new school bag and waved to Emily. "Mommy, I'll do my best." "Yes, but don't push yourself too hard. If anything happens, tell your teacher or mommy right away." "I understand. We'll never make secrets, right?" This was a new rule the two had decided on. to be honest with each other about even the smallest things. Emily's work was also on track. She increased her work-from-home jobs and made time with Sophia the top priority. Her income was less than before, but nothing was more important than her daughter's safety and happiness. Mark told Emily, "You two are really strong. You're walking a new path without letting a person like Harrison ruin your lives." "It's because we had your support," Emily answered with gratitude. "If I had been alone, I might not have been able to recover." At dusk, Emily and Sophia were walking in a small neighborhood park. Watching Sophia picking flowers, Emily thought that true family is not bound by blood relations, but by love that protects and supports each other. The false husband Michael Harrison had disappeared from their lives, but Mark, Lisa, and many supporters had become their true family. Sophia was walking her new life with the conviction that, "Mommy will protect me." Meanwhile, Harrison spends lonely years in prison, continuing to be made aware of the weight of the crimes he committed. His 20-year sentence continues to show society the lesson of the importance of protecting loved ones, and that true love creates family bonds.